Okay, let's get started. So you're here for the Strategic Management of Information Technology Final Exam Review. And let's see, the exam is worth 25 points. It is multiple choice. There are 25 multiple choice questions. Each of them worth 1 point. You have, or will have, over 2 hours, probably 3. It can actually take as long as you want. I don't think it's going to take you more than an hour, maybe, an hour and a half. We covered a lot of information in the course, and what I want to do is kind of go through chapter or lecture by lecture. There's no book information. All of the questions for the exam have come out of the lecture notes. So there's no supplemental reading, no websites, no research required. What you're going to find, in fact, okay, so I write up new exams every term, and at the end I always look back at the exam and I go, well, let's see, how did this one turn out? This one's easy, which is great because for you guys. The Oracle, that ended up being a hard exam. The object-oriented one ended up being so-so. This one ended up being pretty easy, in my opinion. Of course, your opinion might vary. But what we're looking at is 25 questions on this subject areas. This is available off of the bhacker.com website. You can get it. I'm also going to put this video on the website as well. For those of you who showed up in person, you have the opportunity to actually ask questions, and then I can give you answers. So you can ask questions about, is this going to be on the exam? Is that going to be on the exam? Stuff like that. And so what I've done here is I kind of went through the exam after I wrote it, and I went through the lectures to tell you which lectures and which concepts out of which lectures would be important to you. So we started out the course with lecture number 1. And I didn't put lecture number 1 up here, but this is where this first bullet point where it's coming from. I started out talking about information systems, by definition, and information technology, and the meaning of technology, and what's an information resource. There's definitely one question on the exam that gets at the concept of the differences between information systems, information resources, and information technology, and it's going to be like a definitional question. And actually what makes this exam kind of easy is there's a lot of true and false. I would say about a third of the exam is true and false questions. Maybe 2/3, almost half of the exam is true-false questions, which you have a 50-50 chance with. The other questions are select one, so you don't have multiple select. And that is what makes it difficult as well. That's why I say this exam is actually kind of easy. There's a lot of true and false. So you want to know what the meaning of information systems and information technology is. That's really all you need out of lecture number 1. And this is what you're here for, to hear that you're going to need to know what the Porter's 5 competitive forces model is all about. And Porter's 5 forces model, the 5 forces and the competitive forces. There's actually 2 separate models. And I only have 1 question, and it's on one of the 2 models. So those particular model was in lecture 2 and lecture 3. I spent actually a good portion of the class time going over the model, and it's going to ask you something about the contents of the model. If you remember, there's like 4, 5 components. In terms of competitive forces that drive certain strategic planning. It's not a bad model to be familiar with because it's mentioned a lot. Actually, mentioned a lot in the literature. Mentioned a lot. In terms of information systems and technology. And you'll find that also in other topics as well. And I'm looking for the question right now to give you a little bit more insight. So here's a good one. Porter's, here's your freebie. Here's your freebie for showing up. Porter's competitive forces model works with ... And then you have A through E, and then you have one of these, all of the aboves, none of the aboves. So know what the Porter's, I'm not going to give you the answer, but know what the Porter's competitive forces model works with. And that's the one, actually. You don't have to worry about the 5 forces. So there's your freebie. Well, one of the freebies I'm going to give you. After we talked about that, we talked about this top line and this bottom line concept, and what was entailed with the top line and the bottom line. And I'll tell you the bottom line is usually your overhead expenses. And that's what it's referring to, the things in a company strategically that can be managed, either from competition, from innovative products, to operating costs, overhead costs, things of that nature. There's a question that gets at the difference between the top line and the bottom line. And that is one of the questions that's on this exam. And knowing that, what services, products, cross-selling services, complementary products, and things of that nature, which would be the top line. The bottom line being optimizing the manufacturing, the processes, and stuff like that, in terms of decreasing transportation costs, reducing human capital costs, stuff like that, which would be important for the bottom line, essentially. And feel free to ask me questions as I'm going through this. Otherwise, I'm going to assume you're just taking notes and you've understood everything. The concept of the supply chain management and how technology can improve it. There were actually 2 lectures on supply chain management. What we're concerned with is lecture 4, which brought up supply chain management. The same lecture actually brought up customer relationship management. What you want to know is, by definition, how technology, or actually, let me give you a little bit more specifics. You want to know what supply chain management is if you don't know what it is. And you want to know essentially how, the application of technology to help that. And you did. Similar question.
Yeah.
Yes. And I totally forgot that I asked it in the midterm. But if you did the midterm, there's your answer. All right. You guys are ahead of me. All right. So nothing left to be said on that. See the midterm if you're interested in supply chain management. Also, customer relationship management. Did I ask on the midterm as well? All right. There's another freebie. So you get customer relationship management. And how the technology can be used. But, the difference with the midterm is that when you answer it, it was a essay format. You answered with it. Here you have to actually read option A, B, C, and say which one applies towards supply chain management. If you know what it is, that's why I say the exam's actually kind of easy. If you know what it is, you're going to be able to answer it, no problem. If you have no idea what supply chain management's all about, you might be confused. And you're in luck that I didn't actually ask you anything specific on ERP, although it is in here. You just make sure that is the case. No, there is a question on ERP. Enterprise resource planning is a term used to and there's a true false. So know what enterprise resource planning encompasses and how that's being used in terms of the concept of enterprise resource planning. Knowledge management systems. Let me go back to lecture 4 as an example. Knowledge management system, knowledge-based systems, the use of knowledge. A knowledge management system is an IT system that blah, 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 blah. True or false? So you know the nature of what the knowledge management system is doing. And I can tell you, dealing with data. Data plus data is equal to information. Information plus information is equal to knowledge. Knowledge plus more information, more knowledge is equal to wisdom. So it's creating wisdom. It's creating knowledge from facts and figures and data that are being entered into it as input. The concept of enterprise resource planning, as I mentioned before, actually I already covered that. I didn't know it was in lecture 5 and 6. I believe lecture 5 also has some supply chain management stuff in the beginning of it. Don't worry about that stuff. The question actually comes out of lecture 4 in terms of that. Lecture 5 actually got into a lot more detail in terms of the supply chain management. This next one is how can a database technology be used to help a business? We briefly talked about databases. Actually, it was one lecture. It was lecture 6. No questions on data warehousing or data mining. I don't know if you remember, but I talked about data mining for a part of that lecture that covered databases. And the question you have in here is a super duper easy database question. And if you don't know what a database is, learn what a database is. Because the question goes, I can't read you the question actually. If I read you that would be unfair. I can't read you the question. This is supposed to be a challenging exam. So, all right. Nobody in here is going to miss this question about the database. I mean, unless you don't know what a database is. You don't have to know anything about relational model. You don't have to know anything about databases. Just the concept. What is data? Data, it's storing data, logically organizing it, providing utilities for the retrieval through SQL. So if you know that, you're in good shape. But nothing on data mining and nothing on data warehousing. On lecture number 7, we have the decision support and the expert systems. And I covered the concept of the expert system and decision support. And, well, let's see. And you know what, the interesting thing is there's like maybe one question from each one of these chapters on here. Sometimes we get 2, but most of it's, most of the questions that are of the 2 variety are out of the beginning of the course, or the lectures 1 through 6, I would say. So we have some miscellaneous questions on the bottom here. So artificial intelligence, expert systems, and decision support systems are sort of an interesting concept to kind of keep in mind. No questions about graphical information systems. The question regarding artificial intelligence is basically its use to provide or use for competitive or strategic advantages, being able to cross-sell, side-sell, run some statistics. There are no questions about any artificial intelligence techniques, so you don't have to worry, in fact, about fuzzy logic or about neural networks or some of the other odd topics I covered briefly in that lecture. You don't have to worry about any of those topics. Everything that you're going to need to know is going to be related to the concept of artificial intelligence and how it can be used in business. So no graphical information systems, no GIS. Some very, very basic e-commerce concepts are covered. Very basic. I would know what e-commerce is, what an e-business is, and some of the advantages that e-commerce offers in the business world in terms of the use of the technology, the internet technology, the use of or the ability to break the channels, the traditional channels of distribution. So that's actually referred to as disintermediation. But the question, that's really an IS question. It's not on the exam. And neither is the concept of information asymmetry, not on the exam either. Rather than that, it's more of a using the internet to achieve a competitive advantage. There's only one e-commerce question, actually, out of the entire exam. No questions on e-commerce technology, such as encryption or security. In fact, I really didn't even cover that in this class. I just covered the basic concept. One question on the system development lifecycle and the systems process. And I'll give you a hint on that question. What do you need to know about system development life cycles? Do you need to know anything at all? Good question. Nope, here it is. It's a true-false question. And it goes on the definition of what a system development life cycle is all about. And so we know what a system development life cycle does. It's a step-by-step process to build software. It runs through a formal methodology to organize the labor, organize the process. So that was what would be considered a system development life cycle. Actually, I didn't do anything on service-oriented software or software as a service, SOA. Actually, I did. There is one question on service-oriented software. It's a true-false question. It gets into the definition of it. So, service-oriented software are services running as an application. Salesforce.com would be a good example of that, actually, where you're not buying and installing the software. Instead, you're subscribing to a service provider who's giving you software and giving you utilities. And in Chapter 9, you can get a formal definition of that. But the true-false question is on the definition of what is service-oriented architectures. By definition. The concept of, let's see, what did I miss? Oh, here we go. No, and here's a good part. Here's the best part of this entire review lecture. No 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. And actually, if you have a curiosity, you can actually kind of go through those, but you don't really need to. Some of them might help you with some of the case studies or the assignments for the course. But you really don't, none of those, I stopped at about, well, I stopped on lecture 9. I did cover 1 or 2 questions on cloud computing. So if you remember, I threw in lecture 17, because actually the students who asked for it aren't even here right now. But some students requested some information on cloud computing. Actually, she left. She didn't wait. But there's one question. I don't blame her. And it's on the definition. You know, what is a cloud? Why is it useful? And the question itself is, let's see if it's a true false or not. So that you're in luck because the true falses are kind of easy, actually. Yeah, you got 50-50 chances on a true false question. Let's see. Oh, it's question number 25, the last question on the exam. Oh, here's your freebie for staying here, and waiting for me. I'll read you the question. And when I read you this question, you're going to know what to look up. Some different cloud computer layers are, so you go to lecture 17, you look at, I don't know, it's right in the beginning. You'll see the layers. I'll give you one as an example so you know what a layer is. The SaaS, which is the application server software. No, is it application? Application service. We got application platform, service platform, things of that nature. If you see application service, look for SaaS. I'm having a mind blank right now as to what that actually stands for. But that's one of the computer layers, one of the cloud computer layers. And so I'm sure those people who aren't listening to this video, who aren't here today, are going to miss that question. You guys will get it. Because you'll go home and you'll look up to see what those layers are. If you know nothing about cloud computing, know what some of the cloud computer layers are. Let's see if I've forgotten anything, actually, as I go through this. The first page is really easy, actually. The first page is all multiple choice. Page number 2 is pretty straightforward, too. And this is a very fair exam. The Porter's competitive forces model works with questions on that one. The use of technology, that's not an afterthought anymore in forming a business, but it is the actual cause and driver of some business processes. That's an important concept to know. There's a question about the innovative strategy. I'm making radical changes to the business processes. What is that all about in terms of competitive strategies? That actually kind of works with the 5 forces model, actually. But it's not really a 5 forces question. I ask you, 3 important organizational resources. Like what are resources in terms of the organization? An intellectual asset hierarchy. This is artificial intelligence, this is knowledge management. Intellectual asset hierarchy consists of, in terms of picking out, components that might be part of an intellectual asset. We know what those intellectual assets are? Data plus information plus knowledge, wisdom. That's the hierarchy, right? All right, so that's what the question's getting at. So if you see that question, you're going to talk about data, knowledge, wisdom, information. Information resources, that's another. Actually, there's 2 information resources questions. Something about rivalry among existing competitors. Competition, there's that second 5. That's the 5 forces question, the rivalry among So I do have, I misquoted, I do have one on the competitive forces and then the 5 forces that back up here. Both of these from Lecture 2 and Lecture 3. So it's recognition that it's a true-false. Both of them are true-false questions as well, which kind of makes it a little easier. The bottom line, top line, supply chain management, knowledge base, knowledge management systems, enterprise resource planning, software development lifecycle, service-oriented architectures. There's our cloud. Oh, there, there's 2 questions on cloud computing. I take that back. It's 24 and number 25. Both of them. Well, actually, if you get Form A, here's the other thing. So all the forms are a little different. We only have 2 forms because we have a very small class, actually. So there's only going to be 2 different forms. So not much to worry about there. I assume you guys are familiar with the final exam schedule and you know what day you're supposed to show up. If you want to make a change to that schedule, you can. Very flexible in terms of picking out a different time or a different day if you'd like to do that. So. Do we have questions? Now's your opportunity to say, is this concept going to be on the final exam? And I can say, yes, it will be, or no, it won't be. Do we have any of those such questions? And if you don't have it right now, you can actually email it to me as well. I can take it by email anytime. Obviously, the day of the exam is a little short notice for me. You know, you're taking a gamble as to whether or not you'll actually be able to get your question answered. But anytime before, let's see. Let me remind myself then again what day this particular exam is on. You guys know. It is on the 27th. There's only 2 groups. WOW will be done by 1. But if you don't like that, you want an extra. Actually, that's 2 weeks from now. You have plenty of time. How did that work out? This one's the harder exam. That one's next week. Actually, this one is a hard exam. I put all the hard exams first and all the easy exams second in the schedule. It kind of ironically worked out that way. So, do we have any more questions? I felt like it was kind of quick for that long wait that you guys had, and I do apologize for the wait. It's a busy day around here. But, if we don't have any more questions, then you are actually free to leave, finally.